Our main character is a taxi driver. Her customer in the back seat is a middle-aged man who starts lecturing her about driving a taxi because she is a woman. After a while, the MC's patience wears thin. She points out how absurd it is that people look down on taxi drivers when they are simply doing their job, and then threatens him by reminding him that she is the one holding his life in her hands at that moment. The customer gets angry and threatens to sue her, but she calmly reminds him that he is smoking in the taxi, which is against the rules. Later, she feels bad about her attitude during the encounter. While looking out of the window, she notices Park Yoon-soo walking with a woman. The scene then cuts to the MC in a church, praying to God to punish people like the annoying customer before punishing her. She is interrupted by a lady who asks why she looks so sad. The MC replies that it's because she is praying for the sick people around her. Once again, her eyes fall on Park Yoon-soo, who is also attending the church. He appears to be kind, smart, sincere, and almost inhumanly perfect. Some ladies in the church are trying to set Yoon-soo up with a girl, but the MC interrupts and tells everyone that she saw Yoon-soo walking with a woman, hinting that he might already have a girlfriend. She then walks away. Yoon-soo seems to follow her out and asks if she is working, placing a large piece of luggage in the trunk of her taxi. While driving, the MC notices that he is blankly staring at her. He asks where she saw him earlier. She answers that she was just working nearby and asks if she took the joke too far, apologizing for it. However, Yoon-soo keeps pressing, asking if she remembers exactly where she saw him or the woman he was with. The look on his face frightens the MC a little, and she nervously replies that she doesn't remember her. Even then, he seems to be carefully observing her. When they finally reach his destination, she is unnerved by him. As she prepares to leave, Yoon-soo suddenly turns back to look at her, scaring her even more. She quickly drives away while Yoon-soo continues to stare at her taxi. Later, she discovers that Yoon-soo left his luggage in the taxi. At that exact moment, she receives a call from an unknown number, which turns out to be Park Yoon-soo. She asks how he got her number and if he is calling about his luggage. He interrupts her, saying that she can keep it and instructs her to open it. He adds that if she likes it, she can keep it. When the MC opens the luggage, she freezes in cold sweat and drops her phone. Inside the luggage is a dead woman. Over the phone, Yoon-soo chillingly says that she can bury it. We hit a flashback where we see the MC, Han Chaya, being charged with murder and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Back in the present, Chaya picks up the phone and asks Yoon-soo, "What's the meaning of this?" He mocks her, telling her to take a deep breath. She reminds him that taxis have dash cams and that everything is recorded, but Yoon-soo casually tells her to report him then, adding that she won't because she's an ex-convict. Chaya is terrified. Even a woman passing by seems suspicious to her. She tells Yoon-soo to come and take his luggage, but he refuses. Trying to calm herself down, she checks the dashcam footage, only to be shocked to see that she is alone in the recording. She realizes that, unlike a mouse being chased by its predator, she has no one to fight. In fact, she doesn't even know what she's up against. Desperate, she decides to bury the body herself. As she starts digging a grave, she tells herself not to cry or think about it. Over and over, she repeats, "I'm sorry," while digging. Suddenly, she hears the sound of snapping and turns to see Yoon-soo taking pictures of her. With a smile, he says, "I have found your weakness now." He mockingly says that he thought Chaya was a soft, kind-hearted person, but here she is, burying a corpse with her bare hands. Furious, she kicks his phone and tries to grab it, but Yoon-soo trips her. As she struggles on the ground, an invisible force seems to paralyze her, stopping her from moving. Yoon-soo calmly walks toward the phone and says, "Humans always manage to make me angry without realizing who I am." He picks up the phone and tells her that if she doesn't want to go to jail, she must bring one person per week to his place. With a flick of his finger, he makes her head nod in agreement, as though she is under his control. In that moment, she notices his eyes turn yellow. Chaya wakes up in her house, disoriented. It's been 6 days since the incident, and she has neither fulfilled Yoon-soo's demand nor reported him to the authorities. Her deadline is rapidly approaching, and she is consumed by fear and indecision. She wonders what will happen to her now, and contemplates whether she should comply with his demand. However, she stops herself, determined not to give in. As she reflects on why these terrible things keep happening to her, a drunk man suddenly stumbles into her taxi and coincidentally asks to be taken to the same address Yunsu had given her. Chea's mind goes numb and she begins driving in a blank, detached state. Terrified, she keeps telling herself that this is just a coincidence, that she isn't doing what Yunsu asked and that she isn't going to inform him. Upon reaching the destination, she turns to tell the customer they've arrived, only to find the back seat empty. There's no one in the taxi. At home, Chaya checks the dash cam and discovers that the man vanished into thin air just before she turned her head. She feels like she's losing her mind. The next day, when she goes to church, she considers running away but ends up running into Yunsu, who is with a little boy. He still seems to be keeping an eye on her. The boy with Yunsu is named Gerim. He attends Mass with Yunsu every week but was absent last week due to being sick. As Chaya watches them, she wonders if Gerim has any idea about what's really going on or if he, too, is being manipulated by Yunsu. The boy approaches her and sits next to her. While she is still observing him, he suddenly smiles. Chea is overwhelmed by fear again as Gerim hands her a slip of paper and says, "I'm looking forward to working with you." She thinks, "Again?" and immediately asks Gerim who gave him the note. He replies cryptically, telling her that she already knows who and warns her to stay quiet. Outside, Chea confronts Yunsu, calling out how messed up the entire situation is. She throws the slip in his face and demands to know if he has something against her. She declares that she's not going to mindlessly obey his commands like an idiot, adding that her shitty personality means she'd rather report him than comply. Yunsu only smiles and, to her shock, says she did a good job last night. Chaya retorts that the customer just happened to request the same address by coincidence. Yunsu, however, begins to gaslight her, asking if she's sure the customer's home was actually in that direction. Furious, Chaya demands to know what he did to the customer. She threatens to expose him to everyone if he doesn't tell her. Yunsu simply laughs in response. Growing angrier, she repeats her demand, but Gerim interrupts by bursting into tears, saying he wants to play with Chea. This distraction shifts the focus, and Yunsu and Gerim begin to leave. As they walk away, Yunsu quietly tells her good luck while handing her another address. Now Chea becomes determined to uncover who they really are and what is going on. She decides to follow them and sees that they arrive at a children's center. Yunsu and Gerim go inside. While she is still in her car, a lady knocks on her window and asks if she is the volunteer Yunsu mentioned. Chea immediately realizes that Yunsu knew she was following them all along. Frustrated, she thinks to herself that she is not a simple toy he can play with as he pleases. Chea asks the lady if she can work with Yunsu since she is new here. However, the lady refuses, explaining that children easily form attachments and feel hurt when people leave. She adds that Yunsu is like an angel on earth. Chea is instead assigned to kitchen duty. While washing dishes, she finds herself questioning what the hell she is even doing there. As she works, Yunsu comes into the kitchen with a little girl and asks for a cup. When Chea goes to hand them the cup, it slips from her fingers and breaks, cutting her hand on the shattered glass. Annoyed and in pain, she tells them to leave, but as she looks up, she notices Yunsu staring at her with a chilling expression of anger. He walked toward her and grabbed her hand. Chea froze as he stared at her with a wild, almost crazed expression. Suddenly, the little girl started crying, snapping him out of whatever had taken hold of him. He angrily jerked Chea's hand away and stormed out of the room. Chea took a moment to collect herself and decided to follow him again, but this time she lost track of his car. Back at home, she sat and thought, trying to figure out what could have made Yunsu so furious. Then she remembered the cut on her finger. A disturbing thought crossed her mind, and she whispered to herself, "No way this is possible." Determined to find answers, she searched the web and stumbled upon a blog post that caught her attention. Intrigued, she decided to join the blog. Soon after, the manager of the blog sent her an invitation along with an unexpected offer: the chance to become a vampire. The manager explains that to join, Chaya needs to perform a blood ritual, which involves writing with her own blood. She initially dismisses it as ridiculous, but becomes intrigued by the mention of yellow eyes, which matches what she has seen. Curiosity gets the better of her, so she decides to go through with the ritual, using ketchup instead of blood. The ritual requires her to write, I, Han Chaya, will be a loyal servant to the great vampire. Annoyed, she can't help but picture Yunsu's face as she writes it, making the process even more irritating. The blog post lists several traits of vampires. They cannot be in direct sunlight, they can render you immobile, they have a bite mark, and their yellow eyes are always watching you. Chaya rolls her eyes, dismissing it all as nonsense pulled straight from a vampire movie. She leaves for work, still thinking the whole thing is absurd. However, as she goes about her day, we see someone with yellow eyes watching her from afar. Chaya begins to see Yunsu everywhere. Even when she looks back at her customers, she sees his face instead. Shocked and disturbed, she abruptly stops the taxi, causing the lady in the back seat to leave. As she tries to collect herself, she spots Yunsu again outside. Panicking, she drives away as fast as she can. Shortly after, a man gets into her taxi. He starts babbling about how he hit someone while drunk driving, his incessant chatter grating on Chaya's nerves. When he asks if he can smoke in the taxi, she firmly says no. The man becomes angry and demands that she stop the taxi immediately. He stepped out of the taxi and angrily demanded that Chaya get out as well. Panicked, she tried to drive away, but the man quickly got back inside, threatening her by saying he wasn't joking about hitting people. When Chaya lost her temper and yelled back at him, he demanded an apology. Trying to stay calm, she apologized, but the man continued to curse at her. Frustrated, she told him to get out of the taxi and threatened to call the police. This only enraged him further, and he started pounding on the back of her seat. The violent shaking made the car feel dangerously unstable, but the man wouldn't stop, yelling that if she stopped driving, he would hurt her. Completely unsure of what to do, Chaya's eyes caught a sign for Sapumnaru, and she decided to head there. She drove with a blank expression, the weight of the situation overwhelming her, as the address happened to be the same one Yunsu had given her. When she finally slammed on the brakes, her heart sank. Yunsu was standing right in front of the taxi, smiling. The man in the taxi disappeared, leaving Han Chaya in shock at what she had just done. She saw Yunsu mouthing the words, "You did a great job," which only deepened her shame. As she hurriedly tried to leave, Yunsu began clapping for her, his mock applause making her feel even worse. Suddenly, he appeared in the back seat of the taxi, startling her as he asked why she was ignoring him. Chaya kept telling herself that he wasn't real, trying desperately to cling to the hope that this was all in her head. But Yunsu taunted her, criticizing her driving and suggesting that she give up being a taxi driver and work for him instead. The eerie reality of his presence forced her to admit that he was, in fact, real. Yunsu once again complimented her for a good job and then asked how she felt. His condescending tone and laughter only fueled her anger, but he seemed to enjoy her frustration. Before leaving, Yunsu warned her, saying, "I'm letting you off this time, but don't ever use me again. I don't need that many." The realization of what he meant hit Chea like a ton of bricks, making it hard for her to breathe as the horrifying truth set in. She couldn't get any of it out of her mind, her thoughts spiraling out of control. At home, she was startled by the sound of a car pulling up outside her house. Her fear reached a new height as she heard a knock at her door, followed by a voice saying, "It's me." Chea opens the door and is slightly surprised to see her sister, Chasen, standing there. They sit together awkwardly as Chasen asks how she's been. Chea, feeling nervous, replies that she's doing well. Chasen then hands her a wedding invitation. Chea is shocked to see that the wedding is only a few days away, but congratulates her sister nonetheless. As Chea gets up to bring some drinks, she stumbles and falls from exhaustion. This prompts Chasen to ask, "Nothing happened, right?" The question stings, reminding Chea that her sister still doesn't truly care about her. Chasen mentions that if Chea has done something wrong again, their uncle might face trouble, which enrages Chea. Chea confronts her sister, accusing her of not visiting when she was released from prison and only coming now to check if she had messed up again. With tears streaming down her face, Chea reminds her sister that it was their family who cut her out first. She demands that Chasen leave, adding bitterly that she'll think about attending the wedding. Chasun apologizes and leaves, but Chea immediately regrets her harsh words. A flashback shows young Chea and Chasun crying at their parents' funeral. The two sisters are told they'll be living with their grandmother, a woman they're meeting for the first time. However, their grandmother's first reaction is one of disappointment, as she remarks about the burden of having to take in two children. Young Chea is sick with a fever, and we see their grandmother complaining about how hard it is to take care of two children, remarking that at least Chasun is mature. Despite her illness, little Chea is seen folding her bedding when her grandmother asks if she's okay. Not wanting to be a burden, Chea lies and says she's fine, but her grandmother accuses her of pretending to be sick for attention. Later, their uncle arrives, but only takes Chasun to the amusement park, leaving Chea behind. When Chasen gives Chea her candy as a small consolation, their grandmother accuses Chea of stealing it, calling her greedy. Chasen, standing silently, doesn't correct her grandmother or defend Chea. In the present, Chea is seen crying in her sleep, murmuring softly, "I also want the big candy." At Park Yunsu's house, Gurim is seen cooking meat. He casually mentions that there's too much food downstairs and remarks that he has found himself the perfect toy. Yunsu comments that she's quite interesting. Gurim warns that if you play with a toy too much, it might break. Yunsu, however, seems thrilled at the thought of seeing her at the church again, eager to witness her dumbfounded and terrified expression when she notices him. Contrary to his expectations, when Chea sees him at the church, she gives no reaction at all. Undeterred, Yunsu hands her another slip, implying she knows what to do. But this time, Chea fearlessly responds, stating that she's not doing this anymore. Yunsu asks if she's hurt her head or if she's scared. Chea replies that she's tired and doesn't want to live this way anymore. She calls the police station and hands the phone to Yunsu, telling him he can report her if he wants. However, Yunsu doesn't make the call. Instead, he says that he could hurt her, to which she responds by daring him to go ahead, adding that she came prepared. Yunsu asks again if she's truly fine with it, then suddenly teleports them to a different place. He points out how insane she is and tells her to just do as he says. When he comes close to her, she grabs a piece of glass and attacks him. He manages to catch her hand, but she bursts into tears, begging him to stop because she's tired of everything. Chaya notices in shock that the cut she inflicted on him heals instantly, and his eyes turn yellow. Terrified, she steps back, asking him who he really is. When Yunsu hears the word vampire leave her mouth, a small smile forms on his face. He then throws her into the air, making her float helplessly. "You don't need to know," he says coldly, "because you won't be with us much longer." Yunsu tells her to apologize, promising to let her go if she does. However, Chea refuses and defiantly tells him to continue. We are then taken to a flashback of a young Yunsu pleading with a blonde man to turn him into a vampire, but the man refuses. Yunsu's persistence angers the blonde man, who uses his powers to make Yunsu float in the air. A woman rushes in, begging the blonde man to spare Yunsu. She urges Yunsu to apologize, but he stubbornly thinks to himself that he will never apologize to that monster. In the present, hearing Hanchea repeat the same defiant words he once said strikes a chord in Yunsu, and he lets her go. He leaves her lying on the ground, her defiance lingering in his mind. Chea believes it is finally over and that she will never see him again. To her relief, her life seems to return to normal. In the next scene, Chea is shown nervously walking to her sister's wedding. As she approaches the venue, she is confronted by her grandmother, who angrily demands to know why she has come. Chea, without much enthusiasm, greets her grandmother with a simple, "Long time no see," but her grandmother quickly drags her aside. She begins accusing Chea of trying to ruin the wedding and being jealous of her sister, not giving her a chance to explain. Chea thinks to herself that it's not worth arguing on a day like this and mockingly agrees with everything her grandmother says. She calmly explains that she'll just be quick and that she has an invitation. But her grandmother, in an attempt to stop her, grabs her arm and accidentally rips her blazer. Now, everyone's attention in the room is on them. Outside, we see a handsome, well-dressed man about to enter the venue. Back inside, a curious guest asks who Chaya is. To Chaya's shock and heartbreak, Chasen, her sister, responds that she's not sure. This response devastates Chaya, who realizes she was never truly meant to come. It was all an act. Feeling betrayed and out of place, Chaya gives her sister a brief, sorrowful look and turns to leave. Just as she is about to walk out, the man from outside enters. It's Park Yoon-soo, and he's looking for Chaya. Yoon-soo begins acting as though he and Chaya are close, leaving her utterly confused. Noticing her ripped blazer, he takes off his coat and drapes it over her shoulders. He greets her grandmother politely before walking over to Chasen, all the while holding Chaya's hand firmly. This interaction quickly makes it clear to everyone that Chaya and Chasen are sisters. Chasen, visibly surprised, asks how Chaya and Yoon-soo know each other. Yoon-soo is about to reply that they're best friends, but Chaya interrupts, boldly claiming that they're dating. Yoon-soo simply smiles and goes along with her story, agreeing to everything she says. Next, they greet Chaya's uncle. Chaya feels disgusted by her uncle's fake concern for her, as though he genuinely cared. When the time comes, she asks Yoon-soo to give congratulatory money, and he obliges, pulling out an enormous sum. Once again, Chaya feels repulsed by how quickly their attitudes change because Yoon-soo is with her. Frustrated, she tries to leave, but she notices Yoon-soo silently counting her family members with a smile on his face. She suddenly feels trapped, realizing her situation hasn't changed at all. Yoon-soo jokes that he'd like to get to know her family better, but Chaya grabs his arm and drags him outside. Once they're alone, Yoon-soo continues to play his friendly, easygoing character, but Chaya angrily confronts him, demanding to know what he wants with her family. Smirking, Yoon-soo points out that Chasen doesn't seem as resilient as Chaya and assures her that the same thing wouldn't happen to her sister. He then pulls out a paper slip and calmly states that everything will be fine, but only if Chaya does her job correctly.